Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. So, normally if I'm going to show you a long gun, I do that in my wife's studio, where there's more room. I can be a little further from the camera. But she swiped the space heater out of there for inside the house because it's been bloody cold this last week. So here I am in my shop, doing the best I can. Fortunately, this is no longer a very long gun. So, the other year, I was handed some old single-barrel shotguns, most of them in pretty dreadful condition. And there was one of them, an Ancient Stevens. I do not know the model number, but it's from Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts. And it does not have either the model number that I can find, or a serial number for that matter, but there is a patent date of 1919. So, safe to assume this is a curio or a relic. And it had a 30-inch barrel. Now, I have no earthly use for a shotgun with a 30-inch barrel, especially not a single barrel. And I didn't know really what to do with it. And it needed a new forend because somebody had what looked like the cutoff end of a different shotgun's forend mounted backwards and secured by petrified tape. There's also crack in the stock, also stabilized with petrified tape. So I removed all of that and eventually got the shotgun open, which was no small task, and removed a bunch of rust, and much to my wondering eyes, the bore is actually in quite good condition. The chamber is going to need a little bit of honing. There's quite a lot of crud in there and quite a lot of rust on the breech face that needs to be dealt with in a more permanent fashion than simply removing most of it. But I didn't do anything with the shotgun because what was I going to do with it? Well, this last hunting season, I found myself hunting in shotgun-only areas and lugging around my 12-gauge pump slug gun, which was fine. But I thought it might be nice to have something a bit lighter, so I decided to make the Ancient Stevens into a slug gun, which involved cutting the barrel off at 19 inches, 19 and a half inches, and a few other modifications, as well as refinishing the stock and making a new forestock for it, which I made full length for the barrel, and here it is. And I refer to this, inspired by my wife, who laughed at it, the Bubba Slugger. Why not? Now, after removing significant quantities of rust, I did redo everything with Oxfo Blue just to protect it, and I was able to correct and reinstall the original butt plate. I stabilized the crack in the handle here, got the ejector working again, more of an extractor than an ejector, and in fact when I was shooting this it would not eject the empty shells because there's too much traction in the chamber. I have cleaned it out since, but I am going to hone it just a bit. And I may need to do a little bit more with the extractor. It'll throw an empty shell right over my shoulder. I mean, not an empty shell. It'll throw a full shell right over my shoulder, but once they've expanded from being fired, they stuck and had to be knocked out with a rod. We are going to go to the tabletop to have a look at some specific details. But first, I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon. Your contributions help more than you know. If you'd like to join my supporters on Patreon, there is a link in the description below. I'd also like to thank channel benefactors like Pinto's Guns, Rain City Shooting Center, Leah, John, Pat, Tyrone, a host of others who have been endlessly helpful, allowing me to shoot and show you their guns, as well as just donations of ammunition, firearms, just an enormous and unprecedented and enough to make me feel unworthy help. So thank you all. Let's have a look at the tabletop at some of the details. So I'm, of course, rather constrained for room here. You can see where I screwed up with the chisels and took a chip out. And so basically I cut a significant amount off the barrel. And I used a section of the barrel, which I split and spread, which took heating it and a little forging type work, to fit the end of the barrel and silver soldered it in place. Somebody had given me a bunch of Ruger Mini 14 front sights. So I cut one up and silver soldered it in place, which works quite nicely. I did have to shorten it somewhat. There is as yet no rear sight because I haven't figured out what I'm doing for a rear sight yet. I may actually mount a piece of Picatinny rail somehow and put a red dot on it. I am just not sure. The gun is normally in this state where the hammer can't press the firing pin unless you fully depress the trigger. So it is safe to carry, reasonably safe to carry. With hammer down, there's a typical lever here for opening it. As you can see, there is the extractor, which is not quite up to the task until I clean that out a little more. Now the fore end is made from 2 pieces of walnut because I didn't have one big enough. And it removes in the typical fashion. You simply pry it down until it releases. There's a spring here to hold it against this lug under the barrel. Very typical for guns of this sort. Now for the wood here, I got these 2 glued together and set up nicely, went after them with wood chisels, and then I used a section, the cut off section of the barrel wrapped in sandpaper to finish the inside. Sanded everything down, not too far, only down to about 220 grit, and then lacquered it. Likewise, after stabilizing this crack in the stock with some resin, I went ahead, and it looks like a fill here, that's very old. I went ahead and refinished this also to about 220 grit, applied a little stain to both of them before putting on a coat of lacquer. So it's a fairly rough and ready finish, but it works. The butt pad had a number of cracks in the base that again I stabilized with resin before remounting it on the gun with new screws. And the trigger, the hammer of course cocks in the traditional fashion, and the trigger pull is quite a light. And it doesn't look very enthusiastic, but I had no failures to ignite. The trigger guard is a somewhat minimalist but rather elegant shape. And there is some nice detailing in the shape here that is missing from a lot of cheaper shotguns. And overall, it makes a nice, handy little package. Now, the gun weighs overall 5.5 pounds. And my Rio Brennecke slugs that I favor have rather brutal recoil out of my much larger, heavier pump gun. So I wasn't eager to shoot them out of this, not being a complete masochist. So I started the testing with Fiocchi low recoil buckshot, 9 pieces of double-aught buckshot. And at 10 yards, it grouped about exactly as you'd expect, an 8 to 10 inch group, which I was able to get centered by just fussing around how I looked at the sights. What I discovered is that at 10 yards, you basically want to put, there's not a good way to show this on the camera. Basically the bottom of the sight goes where you want it to hit at 10 yards. So I'll take it out to a longer range and see what we can figure out. And I still need to do something about the sights, the rear sights. Now, for slugs, I fired these 1 ounce Federal Shorties, which claim a muzzle velocity of 1,200 feet per second with the 1 ounce slug. And when you fire either of these cartridges out of this gun, you know you just fired a 12 gauge shotgun. But it's not bad. And of course, you shoot, when hunting, you shoot a shotgun a hell of a lot less than you carry it around. So that 500 pounds is going to be, or 5.5 pounds, excuse me, is going to be much appreciated. And these are just so adorable, aren't they? What a cute little shotgun shell. Anyway, let's have a look at the test firing. So I'm pretty happy with how this little shotgun came out. As I said, recoil, even with the lighter shells, is not insignificant, but it's not terrible either. And I rather suspect this is going to accompany me to the Happy Hunting Grounds next year. I quite like it. Now, of course, I've got to get the rear sight sorted out. I want to shoot it at some different ranges, longer ranges. I'm really not contemplating any shots past about 50 yards where I will be hunting next year. So, but at 10 yards, this stacks slug, but I only fired about 3 or 4 of them. So at 10 yards, now it's 10 yards. How hard is it? But stretching out 25 to 50 yards, I am definitely going to want some sort of way of sighting it. But it's light, it's handy, it's small, and it's pretty cool. Good little thumper. I like it. Anyway, so that's the latest project. Came out good. I like it. Shoots good. What more can you ask for? So, I hope this finds you well. Stay safe. Take care. We'll talk to you again real soon. And oh yes, you will be seeing this again as testing continues.